evening and chicken noises to all of you.
Bark, 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 bark. And that one's for Super Chicken.
This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
This is a chapter of notable moments, for sure.
Notable. Oh, and I just wanted to say that we are recording this episode slightly out of order. If you're listening along the stream, this will have come out first, but I actually recorded episode 20, or chapter 23 already. So, through 23 and 24. So, slightly out of order. In those chapters, I talk about moving my desk and getting a slightly new recording setup. So I'm hoping that, again, I sound a little bit better. And this will be the first time, if you're listening in order, that you'll hear the new recording setup. So even though that's kind of confusing that I already talked about it, this might be the first time you're hearing it. Does that make sense? All timey-wobbly. Wimbly, wobbly, timey-wimey. Whatever. You get the point.
Indeed.
Let's go to chapter 1. To Shadar Logoth, and our symbol is the Nodding Ravens.
I think we should do chapter 21, personally.
What did I say?
I just heard 1.
I said 21. Let's go to chapter 1, to Shadar Logoth, and our symbol is the Nodding Ravens. Chapter 1. So if you look at the Nodding Ravens, it looks like in the ebook they cropped it badly and actually included part of the another chapter icon above it.
Oh, yeah, no, not in the paperback. The paperback is very neatly created.
Yeah, that's the one thing that might be a little bit different is the ebooks. I think the chapter headers are just inserted differently somehow.
I'm going to sniff at them.
They can make all sorts of corrections in the ebook, but they can't get everything right, can they?
Apparently.
Apparently what?
Just read the chapter.
Take us there, Corville said, frowning formidably at the map in Rand's hands. It will carry us well out of our way, if I remember where the two rivers is correctly. I will not waste another day finding Loial. Aerith nodded firmly. Hammond, cheeks still damp with tears, shook his head for their haste, and said, I cannot allow it. Eridol, Shadar Logoth, as you rightly name it now, is no place for someone as young as Aerith. In good truth, it is no place for anyone. Letting the mat fall, Rand stood up. He knew Shadar Logoth better than he wanted to. You will lose no time. In fact, you'll gain. I will take you there by traveling, by gateway. You will be most of the way to the two rivers today. Will not be long. I know you can lead me right to the waygate. Ogier could sense waygates, if they were not too far. This necessitated another conference beyond the fountain, one Aerith demanded to be part of. Rand caught only snatches, yet it was plain that Hammond, shaking his great head doggedly, opposed the plan, while Corville, ears so stiff it seemed she was trying for every inch of height, insisted on it. At first, Corville frowned at Aerith as much as at Hammond, whatever the relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law among Ogier. She clearly thought the younger woman had no business in this. It did not take her long to change her mind, though. The Ogier women flanked Hammond, hammering at him relentlessly. Too dangerous. Much too dangerous, came the distant thunder from Hammond. Almost there today, a slight thunder from Corville. Has been outside too long already. An almost silvery peal from Aerith. Haste makes waste. Why Loial? Why Loial? Mashadar beneath our feet. My Loial. My Loial. As an elder, my Loial. My Loial. I had to get through that. Oh, I had to read that whole thing.
I'm sorry, it's so funny.
God, because that's so good in the books. That's just one of my favorite sequences.
Good in the books. Oh,
it's so good. I had to do it my best.
You did a fabulous job. Can I just say, on behalf of the audience, that was an amazing rendition of Michael Kramer reading that section.
Oh, thank you.
That was awesome.
Like I said, I was working on my Orc D&D voice, and I was like, how am I going to do it? I'm just going to use my Ogier voice. That'll work.
It's so fabulous. It's so good.
Give me a second.
Yeah, I just gotta
recover from that.
My Loial.
Mm-hmm. my Loial.
For anyone keeping track at home, there's 6 of those.
Oh, yeah. And a couple in the previous chapter, too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, for sure.
So this is a follow-on from the previous chapter where Rand, realized that they showed him where all the way gates were, and he's like, can you take me to Shadar Logoth so I assume, put a trap on it?
Yeah, that's definitely his goal.
So he's just doing it now. I think we talked about this in the last chapter, because he's the only one that can really go in there and shut it down.
Well, he's not even trying to go in them. He just wants to put the traps on the gates, so that way...
So I want to go into Shadar Logoth and shut it down.
Right, he wants to make it so that way if shadow spawn come out of the gateways, they will promptly die. Because that's his whole concern with this, is that...
He doesn't do it on any of the other gateways, though.
Which I always wondered about. Like, why is this the special gateway? Like, this is the one gateway that Shadow Spawn wouldn't want to come out of because Eredhall hates them as much as anything else. Why is this the gateway you worry about?
This is already, kind of a death trap for them.
Yeah.
What I was thinking is he wants to shut down all of the gateways.
Right.
And this is the only one he knows for sure he can't send anybody else in to fix.
Yeah.
So he goes in and does it himself and puts this trap around it. Maybe he also assumes this is how the Shadow Spawn are getting to the 2 rivers.
Maybe. It is...
Sorry, I said gateway instead of way gates.
Right, yeah. But maybe that's it. I don't know. I've always found everything to do with this plot line to be very confusing and unsatisfying. Most of everything that happens with Eredhall, honestly, is unsatisfying, aside from the cleansing of the taint.
Yeah, I was talking about how the Samael death is very sort of unsatisfying in Shadar Logoth.
Yeah.
And this sort of leads up to it, the whole losing Laia thing.
Yeah, and but just we hardly see waygates being a factor in moving Shadow Spawn around. Like Rand's whole let me get the Ogier to map them out and let me send later when he sends Loial and Carlden off to talk to the various steading about guarding the waygates. We never really get any resolution about if that was relevant.
I mean, Camelin.
Yeah, that's true. Camelin is sort of a big deal.
Yeah, it's kind of a big deal. And, I mean, Fire in the Ways, and there's a couple of references here to things that occur in Fire in the Ways.
True. Fire in the Ways definitely does add urgency to this setup, for sure. Even though it didn't happen, this is setting up that as a possible plot line.
I think he's planning on trying to cleanse the source, but I don't think he has the idea yet that the power of Eredhall will attract the Dark One's taint, because he learns a lot of that from the wound in his side and the alternate pulsing.
And he doesn't have that wound yet.
No, that has not happened yet.
And he does experience the strong throbbing of the alternate evils in this chapter.
Right.
But yeah, I agree. I don't think he has that idea yet. He does want to cleanse the source at this point. He has made at least internal note of that desire. But yeah.
But I think here we have the first seeds of what leads to the ideas that become the strategy to cleanse the source. But I can't believe that he already had that thought.
Agreed. I think you're right that it happens after he gets the wound from Padon Fane, which is literally in the future from here.
And there's a few other little things where he talks about feeling that pulsing and stuff like that when he came here. So yeah, I mean, it's an important part that he notices the sort of the attraction of the 2 evils. And he talks about how the Shadar Logoth evil is attracted to Trollocs greater than it's attracted to people. Right,
because Trollocs were the first enemy, right? People were the last addition to the list, as far as Eredhall was concerned.
So yeah, Ogier Tendencies was asking, what is it about the ways that allowed the Ogier to sense them? Sorry, Waygate. What is it about Waygates that allows Ogier to sense them? Is it that they are attuned to plants and the Waygates are grown? Is that somehow related?
I wonder if it has to do with the fact that the ways were sung into existence. I would assume the way that they grow things with singing, that the ways were entirely the product of the singing growing process.
So in the same way that Loial and sung wood, he kind of is, it's like a living wood that's attuned to Loial. These are sung Waygates.
Exactly what I was thinking.
And so they're attuned to the Ogier. I like that idea.
Yeah, because they're such a powerfully massive and profound and maybe even almost sentient magical ecosystem.
Certainly still living.
Yeah, there's this livingness there. So I could see them being just like, oh, we can tell where those two realities or those two dimensions come closer together and touch. Ogier Tendencies is saying that means that the Ogier can sense their songwood tools. I mean, maybe, but I also think that the ways are still alive in a way that a songwood tool is not. So there might be a orders of magnitude strength to that signal.
And who knows what maybe the Asha'man at the time, I'm going to say the Aes Sedai, male Aes Sedai at the time, somehow attuned the ways to have some sort of vibration on the, call it alien planet that the steadings are from, and the Ogier also exist. Whatever gives them sort of a resonance in the steading that help them through that peaceful feeling, you know?
Yeah, that would help with them like growing and having a internal sense of time relative to outside. That some sort of connection has to exist there. It makes sense that it would be the same connection that puts Ogier and steading into proximity.
Obi Thunder is asking, can they sense Sungwood? I think that once they touch it, they can sense it, but I'm not sure it's something they sense remotely. I think it's one of those things like touching it is...
Right, you pick it up and you know
again,
what
it's like
it
a
is.
vibration. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
The ways were definitely made after the breaking was pretty much complete. Once the setting were starting to be found again, and the Ogier wanted to travel between them without necessarily...
Yeah, because it's presented at the end of the period in the story about how the steading prolonged and soft... They flattened the curve of the breaking, so to speak.
Right.
That it's at the end of that story that the ways get created. So that's definitely very late stage breaking.
You can think of it, it was almost the Terran Real, the male Asha'man created, and then they died out.
Right, they make the talisman of growing. So that way the Ogier can keep making them even once all the Aes Sedai have died.
So the ways were made mostly by Ogier after the male Aes Sedai died.
Which again proves they're definitely more sung into existence than they are magicked into existence. Right, and there's no way that they just grow them like you grow beans. Right, this is a special kind of growing.
Although the singing could activate the Terran Real, and the Terran Real could use the one power to create the ways.
True, for sure. That would be a very Age of Legends sort of thing.
Right. We see that a lot with, like, Terran Real that need to be activated, and you can either activate it with the one power, or if you're, like, a non-channeler, sometimes just holding it, sometimes speaking into it, and sometimes singing into them, especially things for Ogier.
Yeah.
So after that long discussion between the three Ogier, they have decided, Hammond said simply, to accept your offer.
We have decided.
We have
He comes
decided.
over tucking
his
coat back on as though he was wrestled half out of it. We decided.
They decided after a argument loud enough for everyone within 3 miles to hear.
Yeah.
So Rand says, get your stuff, and they're like, yeah, we're already ready to go. You know, if he was here, we'd be ready to start back just to save his life. If not, ready to go on without delay.
It's efficient.
Right. Mm-hmm. Just tell yourself that you're not hasty. Keep telling yourself that, Ogier. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And so then this leads us into Sulin's infamous decision.
But I just had to say I like Hammond's excuse. We're not being hasty. We just didn't want to stay in the beds because they're...
After how much fuss Loial makes over finding a bed that is the right length, I mean, it's pretty rare.
I mean, I know you and I haven't had this opportunity, but I know people who are tall often complain about beds that are too short.
I have heard that it sucks to be not a short person in average beds.
Yeah. Yeah, no, so I've heard.
So I have heard.
No, I always hang my feet off the end of the bed anyway, though.
Oh my god, my brother, when we were little, he was the kind of person who would end up at, like, literally the most obnoxious angle, you know? Like, turned around, his feet are in my face, he's half off the bed, the blankets are on the other side of the room for some random reason. Like, just, ugh, that child.
No, but I sleep on my stomach with my feet hanging, with my toes hanging off the end of the bed, always.
But that's great for your
spine.
spine.
I've slept like that since I was a kid. Probably not. And, like, the blanket wrapped around me in a cocoon.
Well, see, cocoon blankets are just logical. I mean, that's just where it's at.
Right.
As long as it's not too hot, in which case it can go burn and die. But yeah.
It's got to be under 60 by far, definitely.
For sure.
The weather finally got cool enough last night. It was so nice.
Yeah.
Travis got out this morning. He was like, I'm going to turn the heat on. I'm like, you better.
Yeah, Brandon and I have definitely had that conversation. He's like, it's so cold. I'm like, drink your coffee. That's where the heat comes from.
He walked into my room in a t-shirt and, like, nylon shorts and no shoes. And was like, it's cold. I'm like, put on a sweater. And I was
So
like, oh,
you
God,
busted
my
out your
parents.
dad moves.
Don't touch the thermostat. I can sense it. Somebody turning the heat up?
Just feel the money trickling away. No. I was going to point out that the next thing that happens in the story is that Sulan makes her incredibly infamous and long-lasting decision to speak to Guy Shine as far Darais Mai. That's the next thing I have noted. That's all.
Actually, the one thing I had right before there is the stupid trivia question that we lost.
What stupid trivia question?
How long of a count does Rand give Sulan?
Oh!
We put 100, and it's 50. But she says 100 here. Give me a slow count of 100, 10, 50. They compromise to 50. But I knew 100 was mentioned.
I don't even remember what my team answered for that. It's probably wrong. The only reason we won was because we bet all our points at the end. So we probably got that one wrong.
That was the only number one I missed.
I'm just like, oh, numbers. I've checked out like Matt hearing about a book.
So I had notes about the maiden hand talk, which you talked about. And that ends up giving her... That's, like, why she ends up becoming a maid and, like, the whole, like...
Yeah.
Basically, the whole rest of this book, she's a maid until they discover Rand's been kidnapped.
Yeah, this conversation right here between Rand and Sulan is why she loses so much G that she ends up becoming second in command over the maidens once she regains her honor at all. She still ends up only being second in command. And this also is a huge part of the setup for, like, Dumai's Wells, right? They have taken my first brother. Oh my God, why has this woman gone insane? We should tie her up and bind her. That line from Darlin where he's super confused. It's because she's been paying for this for the last 6 weeks or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I think that's about the right amount of time. It's about 6 weeks.
Because her hair gets a lot longer. I remember that's, like, why it's getting ridiculous is because, like, her hair's getting so long and even the other maidens are like, girl, seriously? Your pride is getting out of control.
Her hair grows real fast, though.
Yeah, but I mean, she probably has...
Or, like, a pretty shaggy cut. I don't know.
I don't know. I'm just assuming that the Aiel are all super vigorous and their hair grows really fast because everything else about the Aiel is super healthy and vigorous. That was just a really... Yeah, that doesn't make sense. Whatever. But I do remember that that's part of how you know it's been a long time is her hair gets shaggy from a maiden's cut. So, 6 weeks. Makes sense. But yeah, this is... Her choice to do that is, like... It's why Nandera ends up becoming the leader of the maidens for the rest of the story through the last battle, pretty much.
And Nandera calls her out for it right here, right? Like, Nandera's like, you did that. And I'm like, you gotta wonder if there was some sort of internal power struggle with the maidens.
Well, I don't think it's a power struggle so much as Nandera is the natural next in line for that control. And Nandera's like, girl, I see you. You just seriously put your honor and your position in our order in jeopardy. Like, am I gonna need to step up and take care of this? And Sulan's like, when this situation is over and Rand al'Thor is safe, we will talk about it. And Nandera's like, all right, I got you. We will talk about it.
But it also shows you what the Aiel are willing to do to violate their honor to keep Rand safe.
For sure. And Nandera respects it and is like, you're right, we have bigger issues right now. And we see with Perrin, we see it through Perrin's eyes, these are the two women that get into a complete knockout fight later.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
and Sulan beats up...
I hadn't made that
connection.
connection.
So Sulan and Nandera keep fighting for a while, and Perrin is like, what is the matter with these two? They need to stop catfighting. It is very bad for morale, on and on. And Sulan ends up beating up Nandera and winning the fight, which means she gets less G, which means that Nandera is then the undisputed leader of the maidens after that fight.
Right.
Because Nandera is not the one who knocked out her opponent in order to win. But that's books from now.
Freaking Aiel Jito.
It's complicated,
Doesn't make
but
any
I'm
sense.
slowly learning.
Yeah. So he opens Gateway to Shadar Logoth. And of the people who flood in, they're very confused by the message, but they all arrive. And she chooses 20 maidens and only 20 other Aiel. I was going to say Siswayamon, but male. Male.
Yeah, Siswayamon are in the future yet.
Male Aiel. So you got 20 male, 20 female. Plus the Ogier, plus Rand.
Yeah.
I think that's it. No Aes Sedai, right?
Correct. We don't even have wise ones or anything. We have no channelers aside from Rand.
So 44 people altogether.
Yeah?
44 shall ride forth.
43 return. Well, actually, no, because we leave the Ogier behind as well. So it's 40 return.
Well, you could say the Ogier. Well, yeah, fair enough. But the Ogier do get out.
Right. They don't return to Kyrian, but...
No.
It's a really good paragraph description of Shadar Logoth that's just...
Yeah, and some history. Nothing we don't know about Shadar Logoth.
Yeah.
Just sort of the details that we've been given. There's a little bit of sort of, don't take anything, don't touch anything. Even a pebble is tainted.
Yeah, we get our whole history lesson, our description of the city, and then a interesting back and forth between Lews Therin and Rand, because they're feeling very close and similar in this passage.
And I kind of wanted to read this little dialogue, because this is an actual conversation between the two of them. But at the same time, it's sort of Rand talking to himself about his own fear.
Yeah, like I said, they're very close. They're very aligned in, like, Rand wants the guidance, and yeah, it's very much him talking to himself and giving himself a little courage, hopefully.
I was just thinking, with all the things about how even a pebble of this place was tainted, I gotta wonder, do you have to, like, check your boots to make sure you don't get, like, any rocks stuck in them or something? Like, walk out and have, like, the tainted boot.
Seriously. The dust on your boots is cursed.
Becomes evil. Right. It's like, how small are we talking about? Like, is it just like... Because he's talking about these rocks crunching under his boots, and I'm like, is there going to be a problem here? Is that, like, tainted dust? Tainted love. This place frightens me, Lews Therin murmured beyond the void. Does it not frighten you? Rand's breath caught. Was the voice actually addressing him? Yes, it frightens me. There is darkness here. Blackness blacker than black. If the Dark One chose to live among men, he would choose here. Yes, he would. I must kill Demandred. Rand blinked. Does Demandred have some connection to Shadar Logoth to hear? I remember at last killing Ishmael. There was a sense of wonder in the voice, and a new discovery. He deserved to die. Lanfear deserved to die too, but I am glad I was not the one to kill her. What, was it just happenstance that the voice seemed to speak to him? Was Lews Therin hearing, answering? How did you kill Ishmael? Tell me how. Death. I want the rest of death, but not here. I do not want to die here. I just wanted to read that a little bit.
They both agree on not wanting to die here.
Yeah, definitely. And the confusion about how did you kill Ishmael? I'm glad I'm not the one who killed. There's just, the pronouns here are getting all zigzaggy back and forthy.
Yeah. It's nasty.
And I always thought that line about if the Dark One chose to live among men, he would choose here, is weird because it's like the antithesis of the Dark One. And that's why I always thought like Thane would be a good Dark One replacement.
Well, I mean, what is evil? Exactly. It's
right.
The inverse of what is good. Eredhall created a different kind of inverse of what is good. So, like, as far as someone like Rand is concerned, the two things are as good as synonymous. They only look different when you get down into examining their antagonism towards each other.
I think of them a lot as the male and female half of the true power.
I like that.
That if the one power has the male and female half, Shadar Logoth, the evil of men is sort of, I mean, I don't want to call it the female half of the power, but sort of, if you want to go biblical, the original sin is often blamed on women, and so that has that sort of parallel there. And then the evil of men is sort of the evil of the Dark One, the evil of anger and hatred. And the way the one power works together to cause positive things, the true power works against each other to cause opposite effects. sort of the structure I've had in my brain about how the power works. The evil of Thane was always was also evil, but the opposite evil of the one power.
Yeah, for sure.
Or the true power.
There's a lot of interesting dualities that one can draw, and the fact that the one power that the true power does not have halves within it, but there's also Eredhall to contrast it. It's like, yes, it's just lots of dualities if you want to look at it really hard.
And if someone had to, ask me what this series was about in a single word, I would say balance.
I'd agree with that.
And I think this evil sort of balances the evil of the Dark One.
For sure.
As we see with the opposite pulsings that occur in the side of Rand's, and here when he tries to
And
channel.
that works also for your idea about how, like, Thane could have been the replacement for the Dark One. Like, if there wasn't a Dark One, then the evil represented in Thane fits into that part of the cosmology just fine, right? They're opposite enough that they also work as just mirror images or whatever. It's weird.
And that just in the next turning the wheel, if Rand succeeded in slaying the Dark One, Fane would rise up and replace him as the female half Dark One, and then you'd sort of have this eternal alternating cycle.
I mean, you can have alternating dragons.
Cool.
Why not alternating Dark Ones?
Right?
Seems fair.
And having the Dark One have its sort of origin in the evil of man would appeal to me a lot.
Yeah, that's very full circle. And...
But Neil makes a good point. The Dark One is outside the pattern while Fane is within it. Yeah, I mean, I wonder how much, Mashadar kind of breaks the pattern a little bit.
Right, because, and the Dark One is entropy, right? It's the thing that Grandal thinks of as, the one thing she can accept as sacred is that the Dark One can unmake anything.
Maybe that's why the ending of Fane isn't quite as satisfying as we want, is there wasn't really a perfect ending to him.
Because he's just distilled evilness of human.
Yeah, and just way too chaotic.
Yeah. Yeah, entropy is not chaotic. It's very lawful, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. I think it would have almost been more interesting if Fane had been wiped out by the destruction of Eredal. I think that would have almost been if somehow the destruction of went during the cleansing, he was affected.
Yeah, I liked the part where a little bit of of Mashadar got out, and that's why he didn't die. He was anchored enough in the dagger and in Fane's body. But yeah, it would have been interesting if he just evaporated one day out of nowhere because Eredal went away.
And showed up at the cleansing, and that was another fight they had to do. That would be a satisfying ending to Fane. That you could sort of do this sort of last battle with Fane.
Right, but Rand was too busy cleansing the source. He couldn't fight with Fane.
Yeah, that's all you have. Yeah.
And nobody else is up to fighting
Then you need Matt.
Aside from Matt, which is, how that ended, so. Yeah, Eredal is a very interesting monkey wrench in the entire cosmology of what you would expect.
No, that's why I always hoped that Robert Jordan had a clever ending, a clever place to use him in the end. And it doesn't seem like he really did.
Yeah. The pattern had contingencies upon contingencies.
That's what I have to assume. We get a little bit of him sort of thinking back to Eye of the World and Shadar Logoth when they all split up into the different places. And whoo boy, does that take me back now.
Yeah.
Not just back to that part of the story, but also back to that part of my life when we were doing the podcast and we were in Eye of the World in chapter, 17 or something
Little baby podcasters.
Little baby podcasters, yeah. So I had that moment of aw, I remember doing that. And that's when the story basically gets started to me.
Mm-hmm.
That it's no longer just Rand's POV about sort of boring stuff.
Right, yeah. That's the first time the party breaks up and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And then, after that book 1 recap, we have a big long paragraph of book 4 recap also. The whole thing for the two rivers getting scourged by Fane. I mean, that's book 4. There you go. So.
No, I mean, in fairness, we haven't seen Perrin since book 4,
true,
so
true.
It's a nice reminder of what's actually going on. So they find the Waygate. It's surrounded by this filigree fence of some shiny metal. What the hell is a filigree fence? Do you know what that is?
The curly cube fancy dance.
Okay, so it's a garden type fence.
That's what I put in my mind. Yeah, I feel
Mm-hmm.
filigree it's gilding. It's just sort of a frilly thing that rich people have everywhere and that fantasy authors slap about because it looks cool on the page.
I get very confused about the Waygate timelines because it looks like this was locked up and shut away. I mean, it must have been built before the Trolloc Wars because that's when Eredal went south.
Right.
So I guess just right after the breaking. I'm curious how the hell did they get power wrought filigree after the breaking? Who made that?
They could have salvaged it from the ruins of an Age of Legends city. Or it could have been the kind of thing that someone, put into a stasis box or into a wagon train of Aiel refugees and just thrown across the landscape and pick it up a few centuries down the line.
There also were some surviving knowledgeable Aes Sedai after the breaking traveling around.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them could have found Eredal, Eredal post. Because in Manetheren we saw, some pretty powerful channelers.
Yeah, totally.
So, and this was a similar, we saw channelers during the Trolloc Wars. They were definitely fighting. And
it's a slow loss of knowledge over the centuries. It wasn't just one day they woke up not knowing anything about how the Age of Legends worked.
Sometimes I forget that, because the men basically did, but the women continued to sort of have this deterioration slow, which means a lot of very powerful things were created after the breaking by women channelers. And it's actually only as time's gone on that a lot of that knowledge has continued to be lost.
Right, and the strength for it, right? Channelers are getting weaker over time.
Right.
The strength to do that kind of earthworking would have been a lot more common 1,000 years ago.
It's just, there's this weird time, because, like, the breaking happened and everything was messed up. And then, like, there was almost this time after the breaking when they, like, recovered and had knowledge and actually were able to, like, do, like, make White Bridge and the stone and...
They remembered what they could do.
The Eye and Kalendor. Yeah, they, like, still knew they could do stuff, and they were trying to almost, like, recover, but they just... Too much was broken, and they couldn't maintain. They couldn't rebuild. And they just kept losing more and more.
Right, and that's part of why the Trolloc Wars was such a profound impact on history, was because that sort of almost recovery was almost happening. And then the Trolloc Wars happened and burned it all down again.
And what little knowledge had survived the breaking was just lost in the Trolloc Wars.
Yeah, you've got 90% loss of information and then 90% loss again. Like, you're getting down there.
Right, and here's a line after here where Rand is talking about Hammond offers to lock the Waygate permanently, and he's like, it might have to be used without time for fetching anything. And then he thinks, if he could cleanse them somehow, that was almost as grandiose as his boast to Taim that he would cleanse Saidin.
Mm-hmm.
We have both him thinking about cleansing Saidin, right, and how he's going to do that, and connecting it with the Waygates.
Yep.
But also, I really wanted it to be this to be foreshadowing of him or Perrin or somebody cleansing the ways.
If that had happened, this would have been the foreshadowing for it. This is the foreshadowing for a potential.
Yeah, and we just did A Fire in the Ways in SpoilerCon. Like, that was literally the one of the last episodes we recorded. And so, like, in a lot of ways, I think of this as foreshadowing for A Fire in the Ways, even if that's not technically canon.
Yeah, I have a note in my book to that effect, that, like, this is where that story potential is happening.
Right. And this is where, I mean, a lot of us were like, oh my god, we're so excited to see that when it happens, because here it was clearly foreshadowed. So it was a scene that I expected in the series and from this sentence, and one that I'm kind of sad that I never got in the series, but I'm super happy that Sanderson went ahead and published that externally, even if it's not technically canon.
Close enough. And we had so much fun recording that at SpoilerCon with Takal and Riyadh. Like, that was a really fun chapter diversion. Like, I'm willing to accept it as pseudo-canon. Like, it's great.
Yeah, and huge shout out to Taka Riyadh,
Totally.
by the way. They were a lot of fun to have on.
They definitely helped. They have carried the creative steam for that last event for SpoilerCon.
I think at that point, both of us were like, we're kind of tired.
Yeah, and then they came in and they had all kinds of energy for us to ride off of, and it was...
Right. So we did good, but we definitely rode off their energy for the end of that con.
That was really... I enjoyed that discussion. That was a fun story to read, and it was fun to talk with fresh voices in a non-canon story. It was...
And in a lot of ways, because it was so big, we couldn't really get into some of the really nitty-gritty details, so we had to talk about it at a slightly higher level.
Which was fun. It was easier to not get exhausted at that speed. Yeah, auspicious timing with talking about this chapter after doing SpoilerCon.
Yeah, there's so many little bits and pieces in here that are interesting. Here's the pulsing. From the first flow he channeled, the taint seemed to pulse inside of him, a slowly building vibration. It must have been the evil in Shadar Logoth itself, a resonance of evil to evil. Even in the void, he felt dizzy from those reverberations, as though the world swung beneath his feet in time to them. They made him want to vomit up everything he'd ever eaten. Still, he preserved. He could not send men to stand guard here any more than he could have had them search. So there's your solution to why he goes himself. All the other ones he can have men guard. Here, he just has to lock it down.
Yeah, you're right. I feel like this would be a great time to realize that Eredhall is actually your ally in this one particular instance. You don't need to send men to guard it because there's death fog.
I mean, as long as they come through at night, they can. But all they have to do is come out during the day and get out of the city during the day, which isn't that hard.
That's true, because Mashadar's not actually intelligent.
No, and not active during the day. The sunlight keeps it away, and like the Trollocs don't like the sun, but it doesn't stop them.
That's true. I also like how you said preserved instead of persevered. That was choice.
Well, wrong, but choice. Still, he preserved. I didn't realize those are different words.
Oh, yeah. I also learned today that gratuitous and gratitude don't have the same root. Speaking of weird words.
Preserved. Huh. I'm learning something. That's one of those things where I've read it in my head. I've always said persevered as preserved. I didn't realize it was pronounced, but yeah, now I realize they're pronounced differently. The things you learn when you read out loud for the first time.
Oh my god, right?
So he crafts an invisible inverted trap, which is pretty nasty and something that, like, honestly, he doesn't really use anywhere else.
And we never see the results of it either.
No, we never see, like, a bunch of dead Trollocs anywhere.
It's definitely a figs and mice sort of nasty. That Slayer telling Perrin about the ones that died behind the locked gate, how much Machin Shin was able to feast at the locked gate at Manetheren. We never, I don't think, ever hear about the effects of if any Trollocs ever came through this gateway.
Because at this point, Perrin has locked the way gate in Manetheren.
Yes, because he's on his way back. The campaign in the Two Rivers is over, so yeah.
Right. So, so we know that, like I was saying earlier, we speculated that maybe this Rand came here because he knew the Trollocs were coming through here to attack the Two Rivers, but that's not true. They were going through the Manetheren way gate.
Right, and he knew that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting that he puts so much effort into being disgusted by himself for creating this weave, but we have no idea what it does or if it ever does anything to any actual Trollocs.
I would assume, but yeah. Well, and honestly, it's not that much longer. I mean, Winter's Heart is only 3 books away.
Yeah.
With the cleansing, and not that much, in time, certainly.
Yeah, then obviously after the cleansing, it's sort of a moot point about the Waygate.
Right. Right. There's not really any. I would say that's probably the only time we actually see a Waygate be legitimately destroyed.
Yeah. Because, it's not like there's still a Waygate just hanging in space in the middle of a 3-mile wide crater of scooped out Earth.
No, and I would assume that's the true power. The true power is the only thing that we see that can destroy Quendiar, and so I assume the Waygate is all but indestructible, but the true power, I'm sure, had no problem wiping it out of existence.
Right, I mean, you're having a matter-antimatter annihilation reaction happening between these two kinds of evil.
Right.
Like, even a Waygate is gonna vaporize in the face of that. I wonder what it looks like from the ways. Like, if you go up to, like, the guiding that leads away to that gate, like, I wonder how it gets truncated.
If it's just, like, solid, or there's no portal there, it's just an open sort of hole.
Maybe just, like, leads off like a diving board. It's just like suddenly there's no more trail.
Whee!
Bye!
Yeah. Don't go running down that one.
Right? Yeah, because there's the white line that says that it's going to lead you to a gate. Just keep walking and then bye.
Uh-huh.
Maybe you meet the golem down there.
Tea with golem.
What's in its pockets?
He basically locks it up, and they go to head out, and everything else goes smoothly after that point. There's nothing else that goes wrong in this chapter whatsoever.
Yeah, while Rand is busy sickening himself with his creativity, Leah wanders away.
Is it Leia or Leah?
Yes.
I think they say it Leah in the books. I always want to say Leia.
I feel like they switch a few times, and then I tend to think of it as Leia, because then it sounds like Lyra. Like Golden Compass, which I don't know if you ever listened to the audiobooks of that, but even without that, there's a scene in the second book where the Harpies are screaming her name, and it goes from Leia to Lyre. And in my mind, that always just blends right into the spelling of Leah. So it's like, I'm like, I don't know, there's L's and vowels. Like,
yeah, she's a liar. She ain't telling the truth.
But yeah, somewhere in the middle of him weaving that, I think, is when she gets the tap on her shoulder and turns and walks away for whatever ridiculous reason. And then, everything goes well.
So where does she go? I was reading through this, no hints, no idea, nothing about... She must be inside a building.
Yeah.
I can imagine. Did she fall and hit her head? Where the hell is she? And it's one of those, again, the unsatisfying parts of Shadar Logoth. We never, ever find anything out about why Leia disappeared. We never find out that she saw a ghost. We never found out that she tripped and fell. We never find out that she went inside and got, trapped by a shadow.
Was there just a sparkly thing that mesmerized her for the day? And when she came to herself, it was, midnight and she was alone. Like, we have no idea. None.
And then how did she survive for such a long time?
Well, she was Aiel. That's how she survived.
Fair enough.
But yeah, it's incredibly confusing why she left, why she was hard to find, and why she doesn't die until the encounter with Rand later. Ooh, No Boost Jones is suggesting that she actually died.
I don't think so.
I don't think so, but
because then she'd be one of the Watchers.
But at the same time, maybe everything about her was a projection meant to fuck with Rand. I don't know. I don't think so. But it's so unsatisfying. I feel like anything works.
It's like it's all a dream sort of theories. It's like, yeah, I mean, I guess you could say that, but
Right, yeah.
that's not very satisfying.
I do, like, my headcanon is that she thought she saw something glitter, and then she went around the corner and then got held in some kind of thrall out of line of sight by something glittery and magical, like something Ordeath-esque. And she just was mesmerized and unable to hear or respond to anybody or even to move. Like, it wasn't that she was, like, being held against her will. It was that she was caught. But that's just my headcanon, because that's the most satisfying way to resolve this.
I feel like she must have gone inside and gotten trapped by something.
Yeah, because, I mean, how did she survive? If she got trapped by anything, how did she survive to when later? How much longer later is it that he comes back?
I mean, it's not the end of Dumai's Wells. It's a whole nother book.
Yeah, so like she lives for a long time with like what Trolloc meat to eat now and then. Like I don't get it.
I don't know.
Don't get it.
Question about the Watchers: are they the original citizens of Shadar Logoth of Ard Hall?
I would think so. Their paranoia and suspicion.
Do you think that it also includes anyone else who gets wanders in and gets captured? Or do those just become part of the mist?
I would bet they become part of the mist. Like they get eaten and like psycho-spiritually metabolized.
Are the eyes and the mist the same thing?
No, I don't think so.
That like during the day it's eyes and at night it comes out as mist, but both of them are the souls of the people?
Because the eyes watch, right? Shadar just wanders around mindlessly. Shadar's like a jellyfish. It has no central nervous system. Whereas the Watchers I felt like were always very intentional and very creepy, so like that has to be something else. But that's just me headcanoning.
I thought it was sort of a transformation, sort of in the way that Hinterstap transformed from day to night. The souls are aware and hungry during the day, and then mindless and foggy at night.
I could definitely buy that, especially given that we have Hinterstap as a model. Yeah, I could buy that it changes phases depending on if it's day or night. That would make sense.
Sort of mist versus solid.
Right, and it might be that, like, the mist is all the souls, whereas the eyes are just the souls that still have some, like, sentience and cognizance left.
Some hatred left.
More death-like characters versus just the poor souls that got caught up in everything.
Right. Well, I mean, they say the entire city turned on itself. Like, the whole city was full of
Right,
hatred.
but there would have been people
like
who made it happen versus the people who it was made to happen to.
Sure.
So, I don't know. There's a lot of room for headcanon in Shadar Logoth.
There is a lot. My other question is this sort of fury in the void. Like, no longer is it this distant thing he can insulate himself from. I almost think of it as he's habituating himself to whatever drug he's taking. Like, he's no longer getting quite the high that he used to get.
He's got void tolerance.
Now, exactly. Dude, you've been doing too much void, man. You gotta take a tea break.
It makes sense, though. The human brain is very plastic. It will adapt. You wrap yourself in something 24/7, your brain will make that the new floor for your relativity.
The new normal, yeah. And it seems like the void is his new normal, and now, and especially the anger. I think it's the insanity. I think basically that because he's insane, the void cannot keep the anger out.
For sure. And he's also accepting part of the insanity through Lews Therin, as we saw earlier in the chapter. He's very much accepting parts of his insanity. So, like, you don't get to pick and choose, necessarily.
You don't get the knowledge without the anger?
What is it? Linny says, take what you want and pay for it. But yeah, I definitely see this rage as being not a direct, like, result of him talking with Lews Therin, but just part and parcel of the fact that he's coming closer to Lews Therin, like... This is the other side of that.
And getting madder, right. Yeah, because in different, like we saw in Flicker, different lives, we had different effects of the power. In some, his hands rotted off. In some, his anger got out of control. And he became basically an abusive asshole.
Right, in some, he's just lucky
right,
and successful. And in some, he falls apart in a year. It very much varies, even for one person. I
like the whole, very similar where the Ogier crowd around him to protect him, and he's like, good, crowd around me so I can protect you.
Yeah, I'm like, I think you guys are all just mutually protecting each other at this point. I don't think anyone is actually protecting anyone else significantly more.
I mean, if there's anyone who I would think would have a power against Shadar other than channelers, it would be Ogier singing.
Exactly. Nobody can protect you from Mashadar, but if anyone could, it's either experienced Ogier or the Dragon Reborn.
And as we saw in the Fire and the Ways, they protected them from Mashi and Shin. The singing did. It allowed the channelers to access true power. And so...
Yeah, I mean, Hammond and Kovril are in Fire and the Ways. Literally, we have some of the same singers here.
Right, absolutely, yeah. And there's so many parallels between Mashadar and Mashi and Shin, not the least of which is the pronunciation.
And the fact that they're both wind, fog, atmospheric, demon things. Yeah.
That eat souls.
There's one or two minor overlaps and parallels.
I think in that episode we talked about, do you think Mashadar and Mashi and Shin get together at the Waygate and talk about, like...
Oh, yeah, we did have that discussion, didn't we?
That was funny. So after a long search, they give up.
Yeah. Poor Rand. He just doesn't know how to say... He really wants Sulin to give him the explanation, like, yes, we can leave, but no, she makes him say it. And it's so sad, because he can't say it.
It's very sad. And he doesn't have any of his tools with him. This was such a sort of off-the-cuff, like, we're just going to do a quick jaunt. He doesn't have the little Fat Man Terran-Grial, which is his sort of go-to just weapon. He doesn't have, Kalendor. He certainly doesn't have the Choden Column.
Yeah, he doesn't even have other Ashaman or Wise Ones or anyone to back him up.
Yeah, he's the only channeler with no... Like, he is very, very vulnerable right now. If any Forsaken knew where that he was, they would come after him.
I also noticed that the Ogier are very sensitive to how harsh this moment is on Rand. They're very, very, looking at him with pitying gazes. Not to the maidens, not to each other, to Rand. Because Rand is the one who's most torn up about it. And Ogier are sensitive to emotion. And they're like, ooh, this is bad. This is bad. Can I get you some wine, some chocolate, a fluffy blanket? What do you need?
Ice cream!
Yeah, it's harsh seeing Rand through the eyes of the Ogier.
What do you think about Lews Therin saying duty is heavier than mountain, death is lighter than a feather?
I think it's an eternal and universal proverb that exists across all ages.
I think it's Rand internalizing his guilt.
I mean, more realistically, yes. It's definitely Rand adding to Lews Therin's voice very actively, but I like to think that actual Lews Therin may have also read that in a book of ancient proverbs somewhere.
Oh, I think it's... Rand's right, that Lews Therin had to have that from him, because... It's a modern saying, and so it was one of those things that back in the day, it was proof to me that Lews Therin, they weren't having a conversation across time, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I can see that. Yeah, this proves that Lews Therin is a contemporary phenomena to Rand.
Exactly.
Yeah, I totally agree. I just like to headcanon that LTT could have had it elsewhere, but this isn't. I mean, this is Lews Therin in Rand's head. This is not actual Lews Therin from the Age of Legends.
Correct. But this was one of those lines that convinced me that the Lews Therin from the Age of Legends theory was wrong.
Yeah, I'm trying to think back to when I first would have been reading this and when I was first contemplating this. And I think, yeah, you're right. This is one of the times when it's like, there's no way that this is Lews Therin out of time. This is something happening to Rand, because of Rand, with Rand. Because that's Land's phrase. Right.
And whether that's Lews Therin being another entity in his head come back, but then I was like, but Rand's Lews Therin come back, so what the fuck is this guy? Yeah. So it's just madness.
And I like what you said about how this is Rand internalizing his guilt, because this is him saying, okay, I have to live with this guilt, I guess I'll give it to Lews Therin to hold for me, because that's how I'm dealing with all of this shit.
And he's starting to create the list.
Yeah.
I mean, Laia is one of the first names on the list. Even before, I don't want to say before Moraine, because Moraine happened first, but I think this might be the first time he mentions the list.
I want to agree with that. He adds deaths to the list that happened before the list was created, but I want to say you're right, that this is when the list becomes formalized, or at least the rough draft of the list becomes formalized.
Right. We're again, escalating madness. We're seeing him whipping himself with these names. And yes, the list gets longer and Moraine becomes the top person on that list because she's the first person who died because he couldn't kill a woman. Mm-hmm. But the guilt over losing Laia is tearing him apart.
And yeah, as Jackson Colorado was pointing out, yes, this is the chapter when he actually literally creates scars on his hand. He just straight up self-harms himself right in front of Sulin.
Right. When cutting is less hurtful than whatever pain you're going through. That's bad.
And he just, like, kind of transitions into that in the course of, like, one afternoon, right?
No, and he talks about he's making a deeper wound inside where no one could see. One for each maiden who died. He never let them heal.
I'm like, okay, you have a problem. That is how you know that you have transcended healthy coping mechanisms. Is when you don't let the wounds heal.
Right.
It's not good for you. And I mean, Hammond even just says straight out to him, you need to not kill yourself. Like, I understand you're feeling super suicidal and all of this stuff, but, like, you need to not.
And they are very sensitive to the emotions. They know the actual feelings he's
he's not hiding anything from them. The Loial are perceptive, but the Ogier are just sensitive.
Right. Kind of in the same way that Perrin, when he encounters Rand, is like, his scent is all over the place. What is going on with this guy? He is nuts. And I think the same thing's going on with the Ogier, where they're just feeling his despair and his anger. And, you know, they just saw him spend most of a day screaming for someone who he lost.
Yeah, for one soldier, right? Because the Ogier don't have weird patriarchal notions that the maidens are a more valuable kind of soldier. They're like, you just lost everything. You just lost your entire living mind over one soldier. Like, whoa.
And they value life.
Right. It's not like they're insensitive to the sanctity of life. It's just, that was a soldier. You have to deal with, like, thousands of these guys to get to the end of this. Like, you need to chill.
You need to harden.
Yeah, I don't think that that's how they would phrase it, but yeah.
No. There's a line here, I thought I highlighted it, about how Eredhall got harder, and it was just like, oh, that's exactly the language, and then that hardness made it turn in on itself. It was pretty early in the chapter. Like, oh yeah, that exact language describes Rand making himself harder.
I feel like I know the line you're talking about. Yeah, it's in the history lesson part.
Ah, here it is. Eredhall had been a great capital in the days of the Trolloc Wars, an ally of Benethrin and the rest of the 10 Nations. A man named Mordeth became a counselor in Eredhall and counseled the rule that to win, to survive, Eredhall must be harder than the Shadow, more cruel than the Shadow, less trusting. Slowly they made it so until, in the end, Eredhall became, if not blacker than the Shadow, as black. With war still raging against the Trollocs, Eredhall finally turned on itself, consumed itself. And to me, that's just exactly what could have happened to Rand on the Dragon Mount and in Veins of Gold, if it had gone the other way. He's just making himself harder and harder and harder until he finally turns on himself and destroys himself in the middle of the war.
Yeah, that's why Cadsuane is so concerned with doing whatever it takes. It's, I think, even why Moraine says, I will kill you before I let the Shadow take you. I think that more than just the Dark One, it's also the darkness, right? If you walk up to the last battle in the wrong state of mind, I might as well kill you before that battle even starts.
I sort of brought up the male and female half of the evil. In this case, it's Rand making himself harder and sort of becoming the quote-unquote female half of the evil. And then you have the female half of the evil versus the Dark One, which is the male half of the evil. That's just not going to go well.
Yeah.
That's just going to result in, in the same way that the combining both sides of the one power result in the greatest successes, combining both sides of the quote-unquote bad power, I'm sure would have created just the end. I mean, that's what would have happened, is the end of the wheel.
A very successful hellscape apocalypse ending to all of existence.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. And that is definitely, like you said, if you had to sum this entire series up in one word, it's balance. This is swinging into the dark part of that balance that lets you know that that's a little too much. It's too hard, too dark, too bitter, too untrusting. This is us exploring what that extreme means before we go overcorrecting back with Veins of Gold and Zen Rand.
Lord of Chaos strikes back. It's not going to end well.
Yeah.
By the way, how much the line ending this chapter, when he turned away and opened the gateway to Camelin, it was like tearing his own arm off. Little foreshadowing there.
A little smidge.
Because we don't even see him, when his arm gets burned off, we barely see him react to that.
Yeah, it's like it happened to someone else.
Not nearly as much as this, yeah. Well, in that case, it kind of did happen to somebody else.
Moradin's, the body swap, all of that.
Moradin's body, yeah, all that. The crossing the streams.
But yeah, at this point, he's much less hardened and separated and dissociated from himself. He still very much feels himself and embodies his emotions to some extent.
Right. He hasn't quite disassociated from his body.
Especially after he crosses the streams with Moradin, but even before that, he gets super dissociated. And this is perhaps the beginning of him realizing that dissociation would be less painful than embodiment.
Right. Well, and here he's saying basically the emotional pain, the physical pain is insignificant compared to the emotional pain he's going through. And that to me is always where the disembodiment comes from, is like he's in so much emotional pain throughout the entire series that any physical pain to him just becomes like almost a gnat compared to like a burn.
Right.
You know, it's like a sting compared to being, you know, having your hand on fire. Like the physical pain just doesn't matter to him. And that's why like when Min and everybody's like, "Oh my god, you're in so much pain." He's like, "That's just the physical pain. You got no idea."
Yeah, it's almost a comfort.
That's just
right to be able to feel physical pain. It's like, well, at least that's going for me, which is like, excuse me, wrong value set. But yeah, I think you're right. It's the emotional pain of being the Dragon Reborn overcomes every other definition of pain that Rand can comprehend, which says a lot about the human condition and what RJ thought of it.
Ogier, I like you're saying that Moraine is a very much the ends justify the means. I think that's true in the beginning of the story. I think she changes as the story goes on. I think that's part of the reason why she sort of kowtows to Rand in the end, is that she realizes that Rand's way of doing things sometimes like produces better results because he cares about the people. He's not willing to sacrifice. And I think that she, in the end, part of what brings Moraine around to, you know, quote unquote, obeying Rand is understanding that like he cares about the people too. Like he's gonna, and that's just as important as playing the game.
Yeah. No, I think it really is the end. The means justify the ends. Or the ends justify the means, right? Because she had to set aside her eyes to die notions of what the correct path forward was. Like, well, as long as Rand gets there, then it was the right way to do it, right? As long as Rand is accepting my help and doing whatever he needs to do, my eyes to die pride needs to take a back seat.
I was trying to actually say the opposite, that she sort of, as a character, evolved into no longer being an ends justify the means person, but realizing that, like, the means are just as important as the ends.
Yeah, she learns that from Rand. And then
yes.
Rand doesn't realize she learns that until after she dies. No, I get what you're saying. That makes sense.
That her character evolution goes from someone who believes the ends justify the means, and that's why she's willing to kill Rand and willing to, you know, make these sacrifices, and kind of in a lot of ways is willing to sacrifice Lan. You know, he's just a tool for her. I mean, she cares about him, but he's still just a tool, and she plays Game of Houses. But like by the time Rand, you know, by the end of Fires of Heaven, where Rand is ascendant, like, you know, she's gotten Lan hooked up with Nynaeve, she's got Rand sort of taking care of all these people, and she's admitted that, like, he probably had that right.
Mm-hmm. Which, like, Cadsuane never gets. You know, I feel like Cadsuane is a positive force despite herself, whereas Moraine actually takes that step back and realizes how she needs to course correct and evolve as a character to be helpful to Rand.
Cadsuane also sees Rand when he's pretty far, like, meets him pretty far gone.
It's true. Moraine definitely watches the evolution and has more perspective on where Rand was coming from. Good, solid, goodbye, Leah. I'm sorry that you had to get pseudo dead.
See you soon for a minute. See you later.
That's the setup for some more sad Rand moments.
Right.
For sure. And she plays a big role in Samael's death, but, like, not at the same time. It's
right.
Strange.
Right. Because, like, she just distracts both of them. The only thing I'm thinking is she distracts Samael long enough that, like, he gets Mashadard.
But yeah, this is the beginning of her waking up in Shadar Logoth and figuring out how to survive for however many weeks until that confrontation with Rand and Samael goes down.
And when it does go down, she is nuts, by the way. She is heavily influenced by Mashadar at that point. Like, she's tainted, like, heavily tainted.
Mine!
Yeah, totally. A little, you know, my precious type situation.
Yeah, and actually, I'm thinking she shows up killing Trollocs, which does strongly suggest that Trollocs are coming through that Waygate.
Yeah.
They could be coming in from outside.
They could be, but it makes some more sense that they come from the Waygate.
And she's maybe the one human being in the world that can be set there to guard it. And that's what she's doing, effectively, for strange, twisted reasons.
One would assume the Trollocs, even if she doesn't kill them, they do die because of the thing.
Oh, right, yeah, but Rand said it so that way they wouldn't die until they had a chance to get away from the city. So she would be killing them before that takes effect.
Right. So she's basically killing already dead Trollocs.
Yeah, basically. yeah, definitely points for enthusiasm.
Right.
It's so sad that if she had just not turned around and walked away,
Yeah.
you know, she just glanced over her shoulder and let herself get distracted. Bad maiden discipline. Sad.
Well, do you want to give me your best My Loial, and then we'll cut off recording?
My Loial. My Loial. Super Chicken was such an excellent guidine for Varen on trial.
God, that whole segment was so good.
I can't wait to watch it back. I still haven't gotten to that point of watching the videos back yet.
Yeah, I've actually. What's funny is I've been editing them and I've been clicking through them, so I've seen like 3 seconds here and 10 seconds there, but I haven't had any opportunities to go back. I've been just jam packed this week with post-con stuff.
Yeah, same. Doing the auction stuff and tidying up all kinds of notes and tracking things and making the descriptions for the videos, and it's kind of a lot of stuff.
Yeah, like just canceling accounts, paying people, collecting money, reimbursing folks. Like it's
some of the auction stuff that I wanted to get from Powell's, it ended up being sold out from Powell's, so I had to go find somewhere else to buy it from. Is on and on and on.
Yeah, the recording's the easy part, Neil. It's the editing. That's the hard part.
Yeah, it's definitely more felt like I had to be on my best behavior because I had people watching, and not going to get to edit it.
Well, you had a lot in that of performance because you did Varen on Trial, you did Broken Earth, you did Watt Spoilers.
Yeah. Did
you do a panel? Did you do Varen on Trial as well?
I was Varen.
No, sorry. The Witch Aja.
No, I did not. I moderated for Witch Aja, and I moderated for Rococo Rachel.
Right.
But I did 3 different headliner events, and I didn't quite realize how much of the camera time I was taking up until after. And then I counted it back, and I'm like, wait a second. 3 of the biggest events.
Yeah, you were definitely the face. But, at this point, it's you and me are the face of the podcast, right? The voices mostly of the podcast. Also, you're talented and gorgeous and all those other wonderful things. So, I really like the short haircut, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Me and Travis were talking about that it looks really good.
Thanks. I love how low maintenance it is. It's very, very easy to make it work.
It's like, I really like my short haircut, too.
My dad, the whole time I was growing up, when I was little, my dad had a really long, waist-length curtain, and then he cut it off and freaked me the fuck out because I was 2 years old when he did it. But for the whole rest of my childhood, his motto was, if it needs combing, it needs cutting. And now that I have graduated from having waist-length long hair myself to having short hair, it's a really good philosophy.
All right, see, my philosophy is if you can tell that I've slept on it, it needs cutting.
Yeah, that's the beginning of the danger.
Yeah. Even short hair starts to look a little, squished on one side, but... No, this is my quarantine cut, right? Is I don't want anyone else around my head for an extended period of time, right? Breathing in my face.
I haven't gotten a haircut, at all in years and years. The one time I did, I hated it so much. I just do my own. Mm-hmm. I can't, I don't like getting haircuts, period.
Well, and that's where the short haircut comes in handy, is it's relatively easy to do. Yes. You don't have to worry too much about messing it up.
All or nothing is a very easy look to maintain yourself at home. I've even started to learn how to do fades just through practice, because it's whatever, I can just buzz it all off if it looks awful. It's funny, even though, last year at SpoilerCon, I didn't eat basically the whole weekend because I was so, overloaded and anxious, even though I had a great time, but no room for food. This weekend, first con, I also didn't eat hardly at all. A little bit of breakfast and then just various, food drinks throughout the day, coffee and then beer, but, actually not even much beer. It was mostly just coffee and water. There wasn't even time to get beer. I was like, I gotta stay focused on that.
Yep. Travis, he made a breakfast, bacon, eggs, and pancakes, and the only thing I was able to get down was half a piece of bacon and then some Gatorade. That was all I had all that day on Saturday.
That sounds super par for con. It's I can have some toast. That's it. I think I had cereal.
So the emotions were there.
Yeah.
The emotions were definitely there.
Yeah, very much socially, like, on up to 11.
And busy. Like, that's the thing is, like, I'm like, how am I running around and haven't moved from my desk?
Yeah.
I'm doing both at the same time. I'm like,
Yes, Ogier, I will need to up my game if I'm going to survive at JordanCon. I have no doubt that my survival at JordanCon will be much rougher the first year than all subsequent years.
The nice thing about JordanCon is we're not running it.
Yeah, that will help. For sure. For sure.
Although I think we're in panels or so. A panel or two. Well, hopefully we'll be in the panel or two.
I would be sad if I was not on a panel, if spoilers is still a thing and I'm still part of it and JordanCon happens. It would be weird if I wasn't on a panel. Like, that would just be weird.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you pretty much have to go to JordanCon. You know that.
I was gonna go this year.
Mm-hmm.
I had plane tickets and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But no, it's fun. I mean, I definitely, for all that it's very self-deprecating to be like, oh no, I took up so much space. It's also like, I love being on stage. It's so much fun. Like, I absolutely adored being the center of attention, even though I don't want to admit it.
It's funny because I really don't like being the center of attention.
I'm one of the few people who doesn't really have much in the way of stage fright. I was on a stage doing stage things at such a young age so regularly that, like, I just get a little bit of adrenaline, but it's just like the adrenaline of, like, any exciting event. It's not, like, the crippling fear that most people describe, like, at all.
No, I get the crippling fear. That's a fun one. That's, I say I started the podcast so I would never have to speak live, right? So that all my speech would be, so I'd be able to sit down and be like, okay, I wanted to say that, I didn't want to say that, and that takes away all the anxiety of speaking, is that I know I get to edit this in the after show. And if I say something stupid, I can just make it not happen. And that takes away all my stage fright, you know? But you know, which is funny, because at the same time, I've taught in front of a class, but that's different. Teaching is different than...
Yeah, I mean, for all that I like being on stage, I don't like talking to people. You know, being the center of attention for a crowd of 300 is much easier than walking up to one person and, like, asking them for help with something. Like, orders of magnitude between those things, to me.
Isn't it funny how anxieties work on different levels?
Funny. Yeah, it's funny.
Oh, because for me, if I'm teaching, that means I know the subject and I'm in charge, and I don't have to worry as much.
Yeah, that's what happens when you go on stage. Like, you know what you're doing. Everyone's there to see you tell them the thing. It's one thing to enjoy being on stage. It's another thing to admit enjoying being on stage. It feels, like, very egocentric and narcissistic, but, like, it's really not. It's just a thing. Anxiety is weird.
I know a lot of actors who in interviews have said, you know, I'm a very shy person until I get on stage.
Yeah.
And then it all comes out. And that sort of comes along with it's hard to talk to one person, but easy to talk to 300.
Yeah.
Whereas again, I always feel like the podcast is me talking to you. And yeah, people are listening, but I can ignore that. I'm not talking to them. Mm-hmm. Which is like the way you do Broken Earth, you're often talking to the audience. Because you're doing it by yourself. And I can see how that goes along with your wanting to be on stage and liking, you know, being the center of attention and that sort of thing. Not this, you know, as a selfish thing, but as like that works for you. Whereas for me, that's a terrifying idea.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is I don't like recording Broken Earth live unless I have someone else to talk to. I actually really enjoy doing it all by myself when I'm doing it solo.
I can see that, because that gives you the chance to rehearse and get that perfect.
It's not so much about the rehearsing, it's about the fact that I'll end up talking in circles because I'm afraid of the dead air, and there's no one to, like, kick me out of that.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense.
But when I'm by myself, I can just trail off in the middle of a sentence and read the book for 10 minutes and then come back to it just in the middle of a different thought, and it's not weird. But in conversation, it's way more fun to have lots of people there and have it be more of that round table kind of feel. It's a very interesting exploration of my psyche to do group versus solo podcasting.
I have not really dug into the solo podcasting, other than monologuing for like half an hour on this podcast. But that's usually it's not usually intentional.
That's different. You know, you have an audience and a conversation partner. You just don't shut up. It's different.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or
support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?